My grandma forced me to take over my dead cousin's life, then locked the door from the outside on the morning of my rehearsal dinner. When I finally asked her why I had to live as someone else forever, she smoothed my veil and said, because her story was worth saving, yours wasn't. I just stared at her. That was 6 days ago. This morning, she fainted during a cake tasting and had to be carried out. What did your family expect of you once you turned 18? As soon as I was a legal adult, my grandma told me that I'd be taking over my dead cousin's identity, living as her for the rest of my life to preserve the family legacy. My grandma controlled our family through money and fear. She'd inherited a fortune from her father and used it to dictate every aspect of our lives. Growing up, I watched her destroy relatives who defied her through disinheritance and banishment. She believed family reputation was worth any sacrifice. Her favorite granddaughter, Sophia, had died in a car accident 6 months earlier, taking with her a full scholarship to Yale and a serious relationship with a senator's son. Grandma refused to let those advantages die with her. I had no idea why she'd kept Sophia's death so quiet. No funeral, no obituary. Now I knew. After she told me her sick plan, Grandma presented me with Sophia's ruby ring, forcing it onto my finger. She explained that I looked enough like Sophia to pass with some adjustments. She'd already filed paperwork claiming I was the one who died, that there'd been a mix-up at the morgue. Starting tomorrow, I would move into Sophia's apartment, take her classes, marry her fiancé. Mom stood beside her smiling emptily, talking about what an honor it was to preserve Sophia's bright future. The transformation started immediately. Grandma hired specialists to teach me Sophia's mannerisms, her handwriting, her laugh. They dyed my hair, shaped my eyebrows, trained me to walk in her distinctive gliding style. I had to study videos of her for hours, memorizing speech patterns and inside jokes. They made me wear her clothes, use her perfume, sleep in her sheets that still smelled like her. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw them erasing me and painting my dead cousin over my bones. The hardest part was her long-term boyfriend, Daniel. He came for Sunday dinners, holding my hand under the table while calling me Sophia. Grandma had told him I'd developed amnesia from trauma, explaining why I seemed different. I hadn't been dead for the last 6 months. I'd been away at a facility trying to get better. He'd tell stories about their memories together while I nodded and smiled, feeling sick. He'd kiss me goodbye using pet names meant for a dead girl. Mom would critique my performance afterward, saying I needed to seem more in love or Daniel would get suspicious. I tried to resist subtly at first. I'd forget important dates from Sophia's life, hoping people would realize something was wrong. But Grandma had thought of everything. She'd created detailed amnesia documentation from hired doctors. When I acted too different, she'd increase my therapy sessions, which were really just more intensive training. She monitored every text I sent as Sophia, every social media post, making me redo them until they sounded right. Once they shipped me off to Yale, I thought being away from home would give me freedom to drop the act. But Grandma had students watching me, reporting back if I deviated from Sophia's schedule or personality. When I tried telling Sophia's roommate the truth, she laughed and said grief makes people say crazy things. Grandma had preemptively told everyone I might claim to be someone else due to trauma. No one believed I wasn't Sophia. Daniel proposed on Sophia's birthday, in front of both families at the restaurant she'd loved. The ring was enormous, the moment perfectly orchestrated. I stood there shaking, wanting to scream that Sophia was dead and I wasn't her. But Mom's hand gripped my shoulder in warning. Grandma smiled from across the table, her eyes cold and threatening. I said yes in Sophia's voice while something inside me died. They set the wedding for next summer, planning to complete my transformation into her. But something in Daniel changed. He seemed sadder, guilty even. One night after dinner, he pulled me aside and whispered, I know something's wrong. You're not yourself. My heart pounded. He was finally seeing through the lies. Over the next weeks, I slowly let him see more differences. When he confronted me privately, I broke down and told him everything. Daniel held me while I sobbed out the truth. He was horrified, said he'd suspected something was wrong but never imagined this. He promised to help me escape. We spent weeks planning secretly, using his family's connections to get me new documents. He'd create an alibi for our elopement while actually putting me on a plane to Canada. The night before the wedding was our only chance. The night before I was supposed to leave, Daniel texted me to meet him at Sophia's grave. He said we should say goodbye to her properly before starting fresh. When I arrived, he was standing over the headstone that bore my name instead of Sophia's. I wanted to do this here, he said quietly, so Sophia could watch. Before I could run, Grandma stepped out from behind a monument with 2 men who grabbed my arms. Did you really think he didn't know? Grandma asked, almost pitying. This was all mostly his idea. Daniel explained how he'd been reporting our entire relationship, every word I'd said, every escape plan I'd made. He'd played the perfect concerned fiancé while making sure I'd never get away. They dragged me to a van while I screamed my real name over and over. Daniel finally looked at me, his face calm. I did love Sophia, he said, but you'll do. We have Sophia's signature ready to go for a prenup. If you ever try to leave or tell anyone, you'll be institutionalized. My father's a judge. It's already arranged. As they forced me into the van, I realized the cruelest truth. Nobody was going to save me, and I was about to marry the man who'd helped bury me alive in my cousin's life. The van doors slammed shut, trapping me in darkness. My wrists burned where they'd zip-tied them together. The engine roared to life and we lurched forward, away from the cemetery where my own gravestone stood as a monument to this nightmare. I thrashed against the restraints, kicking at the van walls until my feet throbbed. The 2 men Grandma had brought sat on either side of me, their faces blank as they held me down. One pressed a cloth over my nose and mouth. The sweet chemical smell made my head swim. I fought to stay conscious, but the world dissolved into fragments. When I woke, sunlight streamed through lace curtains. I lay in Sophia's bed, in Sophia's room, wearing Sophia's silk nightgown. My wrists showed purple bruises, but no restraints. The bedroom door stood open, revealing Grandma in the hallway chair, reading a newspaper. She looked up when I stirred. Her smile held no warmth. She folded the paper and entered, sitting on the bed's edge like she used to when I was small and sick. Her hand touched my forehead, checking for fever that wasn't there. I jerked away from her touch. She grabbed my chin, forcing me to meet her eyes. Her fingers dug into my jaw until tears formed. She studied my face like an artist examining their work, turning my head side to side. Finally, she released me and stood. She walked to the dresser, picking up Sophia's hairbrush. She returned and began brushing my hair with long, methodical strokes. I sat frozen, knowing resistance would only make things worse. The brush caught on tangles, yanking my scalp. She hummed Sophia's favorite song while she worked, styling my hair exactly how my cousin used to wear it. When she finished, she set the brush aside and opened Sophia's jewelry box. She selected pearl earrings, the ones Sophia wore to church every Sunday. Her hands moved efficiently, removing my simple studs and replacing them. Next came the tennis bracelet from Sophia's Sweet 16, then the gold necklace with the tiny Yale pendant. Each piece of jewelry felt like another chain binding me to this stolen life. Grandma stepped back to admire her work. She nodded, satisfied, then pulled out her phone and took several photos from different angles. Mom entered carrying a tray of food. She set it on the nightstand without looking at me directly. The smell of eggs made my stomach turn, but Grandma insisted I eat. Every bite tasted like ash. They watched me consume every morsel, ensuring I maintained Sophia's healthy appetite. After breakfast, Grandma produced a thick binder. Inside were schedules, lists, photographs, and detailed notes about Sophia's life. She opened to a section labeled wedding planning and began reviewing every detail I needed to memorize. The venue, the flowers, the guest list, the menu choices Sophia had supposedly made before her accident. My input wasn't wanted or needed. I just had to show up and play the part of the eager bride. Grandma had already sent save the dates from Sophia's email account. She showed me screenshots of the messages, responses from Sophia's college friends excited to attend. People I'd never met thought they were coming to celebrate their friend's happiness. Instead, they'd witness a performance, a ghost story where the dead girl got her happy ending. The dress fitting was that afternoon. Grandma and Mom flanked me as we entered the boutique. The consultant gushed over how radiant I looked, how lucky I was to marry into such a prominent family. She'd altered Sophia's measurements to fit my slightly different frame. I stood on the platform while they pinned white satin around me. In the three-way mirror, I saw myself disappearing. The dress transformed me into the bride Sophia should have been. Mom wiped away tears, playing the emotional mother perfectly. The consultant asked about my veil preference. Before I could respond, Grandma selected an heirloom piece from her own wedding. She placed it on my head with reverent care. The weight of generations pressed down on me. All those women who'd worn it before, who'd had choices I'd never get. Back at the house, Daniel waited in the living room. He rose when we entered, crossing to kiss my cheek. His lips felt cold against my skin. He complimented the photos Grandma showed him from the fitting, saying I looked beautiful. I wonder what's really going through Daniel's mind when he kisses her cheek so coldly. Does he actually believe he's honoring Sophia somehow? Or is this just about keeping his political connections? We sat together on the couch while he discussed honeymoon plans. He'd booked 2 weeks in Italy, all the places Sophia had dreamed of visiting. He showed me the itinerary on his phone, his arm around my shoulders like we were any normal couple. I studied his face, searching for signs of the guilt I'd glimpsed before, but his mask had returned, perfect and impenetrable. He played the devoted fiancé flawlessly, even when Grandma left us alone, especially when she left us alone. He told me about the house he'd bought for us, in the same neighborhood as his parents, close enough for family dinners every Sunday, for Grandma to drop by whenever she pleased. The walls were already painted in Sophia's favorite colors. He'd transferred all her belongings there. My new prison would be prettier than this one, but no less secure. He showed me photos of the security system he'd installed, emphasizing how safe I'd be. Cameras covered every entrance, every room except the bathrooms, for my protection, he assured me. That night, I lay awake planning. The sleeping pills they'd started giving me sat under my tongue until Mom left. Then I spit them into a tissue. I needed my mind clear to find a way out. The window had new locks. The door stayed guarded, but there had to be something. I crept to Sophia's desk and searched through drawers. Most contained wedding planning materials, but in the back of one, I found her old diary. The entries stopped 6 months ago, days before her death. I read by moonlight, looking for anything useful. The final entry made my blood freeze. Sophia had written about feeling trapped, about Daniel's controlling behavior, about wanting to break their engagement. She'd planned to talk to Grandma about it. 3 days later, she died in that accident. My hands shook as I returned the diary to its hiding spot. The truth seemed impossible, too horrible to fully grasp, but the pieces fit too perfectly. Sophia had wanted out, and now they had me as her replacement, a more compliant version who'd already learned the price of resistance. The next morning brought wedding cake tasting. I sat between Mom and Grandma while Daniel fed me forkfuls of different flavors: vanilla with raspberry filling, chocolate with caramel, red velvet with cream cheese. Each sample stuck in my throat. The baker chatted about sugar flowers and fondant techniques while I nodded mechanically. Daniel selected the lemon cake with lavender buttercream, Sophia's favorite according to him. I'd never seen her eat lemon anything, but my opinion didn't matter. After the tasting, we visited the florist. Daniel had opinions about everything: centerpieces, bouquets, boutonnieres. He selected white roses and baby's breath, classic and traditional. The florist praised his attention to detail while I stood silent. Grandma scheduled an appointment at the stationery store next. Wedding invitations needed my approval, though the design was already chosen. Sophia's careful handwriting had been digitized for the addressing. Even dead, she'd sign her own wedding invitations. The days blurred together in an endless parade of appointments. Dance lessons where Daniel led me through steps Sophia had known, menu tastings where I pretended to have opinions about fish or chicken, gift registry sessions where we selected items for a home I'd never wanted. Between wedding preparations, the therapy sessions continued. A woman who claimed to be a grief counselor but acted more like an acting coach drilled me on Sophia's mannerisms. She corrected my posture, my laugh, the way I held a coffee cup. She made me practice Sophia's signature until my hand cramped. Legal documents required that exact script. The prenuptial agreement Daniel mentioned would need Sophia's name signed perfectly. Every loop and flourish had to match, or questions might arise. Mom supervised my social media presence, crafting posts about wedding excitement and tagging Sophia's friends. She responded to comments and messages, maintaining conversations I'd never participated in. Sophia's online life continued seamlessly while I watched from inside her skin. The rehearsal dinner loomed closer. Grandma reviewed the guest list, all of Daniel's family and their important connections: judges, senators, business leaders who'd ensure no one listened if I tried to speak up. The net around me pulled tighter with each passing day. One afternoon, while Grandma met with the wedding planner, I found myself briefly alone in the kitchen. I grabbed the phone, dialing the only number I remembered besides family. My best friend from high school, someone who'd known me before all this started. The phone rang once before Mom appeared, yanking it from my hand. She didn't speak, just looked at me with disappointment that cut deeper than anger would have. She deleted the call history and pocketed the phone. After that, all phones disappeared from easy reach. That night, Daniel took me to dinner at Sophia's favorite restaurant again. The waiter recognized us, commenting on how nice it was to see me looking better. Daniel had spread the amnesia story throughout Sophia's regular spots. thoughts. Everyone treated me with gentle concern. He ordered for both of us, selecting the salmon Sophia always chose. I pushed it around my plate while he talked about the future. His father had arranged a position for him at a prestigious firm. I'd have plenty of time for charity work, the kind of visible volunteering that political wives did. On the drive home, he took a detour past the church where we'd marry. The building loomed against the dark sky, its stained glass windows like watching eyes. He parked and turned to me, his expression serious in the dashboard light. For a moment, I thought he might confess, might show some crack in his perfect facade. Instead, he pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay a pair of diamond earrings, a wedding gift he wanted me to wear on our day. They'd belonged to his grandmother, a family heirloom to match Grandma's veil. He fastened them in my ears himself, his fingers gentle but firm. The diamonds caught the streetlight, throwing tiny rainbows across the car's interior. Beautiful shackles for a beautiful prison. He kissed me then, soft and careful, like I might break. Back at the house, I found Grandma waiting in Sophia's room. She held a photo album I'd never seen before. Inside were pictures of Sophia throughout her life, from baby photos to college graduation. Grandma turned the pages slowly, narrating each memory. She spoke about Sophia's first piano recital, her high school valedictorian speech, her acceptance to Yale. The pride in her voice was real, the grief too. But underneath lay something harder, a determination that her favorite granddaughter's story wouldn't end with a car accident. When she reached the final photos, taken just weeks before Sophia's death, she closed the album. She placed it in my hands like she was passing on sacred texts. This was my history now, my past to memorize and recite on command. She left without another word, but the message was clear. I wasn't just replacing Sophia, I was becoming her. Every memory, every achievement, every relationship would be mine to maintain. The girl I'd been was already buried under that headstone with my name. I sat with the album, studying each photo. Sophia smiled back at me from every page, unaware of how her life would be stolen twice. First by death, then by those who claimed to love her most. I wondered if she'd suspected, in those final days, what they were capable of. The sleeping pills sat on my nightstand again. This time I took them, craving the oblivion they offered. But sleep brought no peace. Only dreams where Sophia and I switched places over and over, until I couldn't remember which one of us was really dead. Morning came too soon, bringing the final week before the wedding. Grandma announced we'd be staying at the family estate to prepare. My last hope of escape during transit crumbled. The estate was even more secure than this house, with acres of private land and loyal staff. As Mom packed Sophia's clothes into suitcases, I watched my old life disappear completely. No trace of me remained in this room, this house, this family. When we left for the estate, I knew I might never have another chance at freedom. The car pulled away from the house, Grandma and Mom flanking me in the back seat. Daniel followed in his own car, maintaining the illusion that we weren't living together before marriage. But I knew he'd be at the estate too, watching, ensuring his investment didn't run. Through the window, I watched the familiar streets disappear. Somewhere in this city, people who'd known me thought I was dead. They'd mourned, moved on, accepted the loss. None of them would recognize the bride in the newspaper announcements, perfectly styled to look like someone else. The estate gates loomed ahead, iron and imposing. They swung open at our approach, then closed behind us with finality. The long driveway wound through manicured grounds where Sophia had played as a child, where she'd dreamed of her own wedding day. Now I'd live that dream for her, whether I wanted to or not. The house rose before us, all white columns and gleaming windows, beautiful and cold as a mausoleum. Grandma squeezed my hand as we parked, her grip promising that this was only the beginning. Inside, the staff waited to greet us. They'd known Sophia since birth, had watched her grow up. Now they smiled at me with fond familiarity, seeing only what they expected to see. The housekeeper hugged me, saying how wonderful it was to have me home. My room, Sophia's childhood room, had been prepared for a bride. White flowers on every surface, gifts from well-wishers stacked on the desk. The wedding dress hung on the closet door like a ghost waiting to possess me. 6 more days until I disappeared completely. That night, as the house settled into sleep, I stood at the window looking out at the grounds. Security cameras in every room except bathrooms. Daniel's really committed to this protective boyfriend act while building what's basically a fancy jail cell with Egyptian cotton sheets and mood lighting. Somewhere beyond those gates, my real life continued without me. But here in this beautiful prison, I was learning the hardest truth. Sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones who bury you alive. The next morning would bring more preparations, more rehearsals, more steps toward a future I hadn't chosen. But tonight, in the quiet darkness, I made myself a promise. They might force me to wear Sophia's face, speak with her voice, live in her skin, but somewhere deep inside, in a place they couldn't reach, I'd keep one small part of myself alive. It wasn't much of a rebellion. It wouldn't save me, but it was all I had left, and I held onto it like a drowning person holds their last breath, because if I let that go too, there'd be nothing left of me at all. And that's exactly what they wanted. The estate's morning routine began at dawn with staff preparing breakfast in the vast kitchen below. I heard their movements through the floorboards, the familiar sounds of Sophia's childhood home, now my prison soundtrack. My reflection in the antique mirror showed a stranger wearing my cousin's face, her silk pajamas hanging on my frame. Grandma entered without knocking, carrying a leather portfolio. She set it on the vanity and opened it to reveal detailed schedules for the remaining days before the wedding. Every hour was accounted for, every moment choreographed. She pointed to the first item, morning yoga with Sophia's personal instructor. The instructor arrived precisely at 7, a woman who'd trained Sophia since high school. She guided me through poses my cousin had mastered, correcting my form with gentle touches. My muscles screamed from holding positions Sophia had found effortless. The instructor mentioned how nice it was to see me recovering from my trauma. After yoga came breakfast on the terrace. Daniel joined us, kissing my temple before sitting beside me. He wore tennis whites, planning to play with his father later. The conversation flowed around me while I picked at fresh fruit and yogurt, Sophia's usual morning meal according to the meal plan Grandma had created. The wedding coordinator arrived with fabric samples for the reception tent linings. She spread them across the table, discussing how each would photograph in different lighting. Daniel selected ivory silk without asking my opinion. The coordinator made notes in her tablet, confirming delivery times with practiced efficiency. Mom appeared with a box of thank you cards that needed Sophia's signature. 200 pre-written messages of gratitude for engagement gifts I'd never seen. My hand cramped after the first dozen, but Mom stood behind me, watching every stroke of the pen. The cards would be mailed tomorrow, maintaining Sophia's reputation for prompt etiquette. The afternoon brought the final dress fitting. The seamstress had made the last alterations based on Grandma's notes. I stood still while while she checked every seam, every button, every inch of beading. The dress fit perfectly now, transforming my body into Sophia's silhouette. In the mirror, my cousin's ghost stared back. Daniel's mother arrived for tea, bringing his grandmother's wedding pearls for me to wear. She clasped them around my neck with tears in her eyes, talking about how proud she was to welcome Sophia into their family. The pearls felt heavy against my throat, another chain in my growing collection of heirloom shackles. That evening, the photographer came to take engagement photos around the estate grounds. He positioned us by the fountain, under the willow tree, on the stone bridge over the pond. Daniel's hands on my waist felt possessive rather than loving. The photographer praised our chemistry while I smiled Sophia's practiced smile. Dinner was a formal affair with both families present. Daniel's father discussed the prenuptial agreement, explaining the terms while I nodded silently. Everything would remain separate, protecting both family fortunes. I would sign it tomorrow, using Sophia's signature I'd perfected through endless practice. After dinner, I excused myself, claiming a headache. In Sophia's room, I searched for any means of communication. The laptop had been removed, the phone disconnected. Even the old radio was gone. They'd eliminated every possible connection to the outside world. I found a servant's staircase behind a tapestry, a hidden passage Sophia had shown me during childhood visits. It led to the kitchen, usually empty at this hour. I crept down, hoping to find a phone or computer. Instead, I found the cook still working, preparing tomorrow's meals. She smiled warmly, asking if I needed anything. Back in my room, I discovered Mom waiting. She'd noticed my absence from the family gathering. Her disappointment was palpable as she reminded me of my obligations. Tomorrow would bring the rehearsal dinner, and I needed to be perfect. She produced another sleeping med, watching me swallow it this time. The next morning, I woke to find my door locked from the outside, a new addition to my captivity. Grandma explained through the door that it was for my protection, ensuring I got proper rest before the busy day ahead. The lock would be removed once I dressed for the rehearsal. The hairdresser arrived to practice the wedding day style. She worked for hours, creating an elaborate updo that Sophia had selected from bridal magazines. Every pin felt like a needle in my skull. The makeup artist followed, testing different looks under various lighting conditions. My face became a canvas for Sophia's final transformation. Lunch was served in my room, a light meal to ensure I'd fit into the rehearsal dinner dress. Mom supervised while I ate, discussing the evening's schedule. The rehearsal at the church, followed by dinner at the country club. All of Daniel's extended family would attend, along with important family friends. The church felt cavernous as we practiced the ceremony. I walked the aisle again and again, matching my pace to the organist's tempo. Daniel waited at the altar, his smile never wavering. The minister explained each part of the service while I memorized my positions, my responses, my role in this macabre performance. Daniel's cousins served as groomsmen, joking about bachelor party plans. His sister would be a bridesmaid, along with Sophia's college friends who'd flown in for the wedding. They hugged me warmly, saying how beautiful I looked, how happy they were to see me recovered from my accident. The rehearsal dinner was an elaborate affair. 50 guests filled the country club's private dining room. I sat between Daniel and his father, smiling through toast after toast. Stories about Sophia's accomplishments, her bright future, her perfect match with Daniel. Each speech felt like another nail in my coffin. Daniel's best man told stories from their prep school days, inside jokes I was supposed to understand. I laughed when others laughed, raised my glass when they toasted, played the part of the blushing bride. Under the table, Daniel's hand gripped mine tightly, a constant reminder of my captivity. After dinner, the guests mingled on the terrace. I tried to slip away, but Mom appeared at my elbow, guiding me from conversation to conversation. Each interaction required perfect performance, remembering names and relationships Sophia had known for years. My face ached from smiling. Late that night, back at the estate, I heard voices in the hallway. Daniel and Grandma discussing security for the wedding day. They'd hired additional staff to ensure no disruptions. Every exit would be monitored, every guest verified. My prison would extend to the church and reception venue. I tested the window locks again, finding them reinforced since yesterday. The bathroom window was too small to squeeze through. The servant's staircase had been sealed. Every possible escape route had been eliminated. They'd thought of everything, as always. The next day brought a spa appointment with a bridal party. Sophia's friends chattered excitedly while we got manicures and facials. They reminisced about college memories I'd never shared, spring breaks I hadn't attended, parties I'd never experienced. I smiled and nodded, letting them fill the silence with their stories. During the massage, I lay face down on the table, tears soaking into the face cradle. The masseuse assumed they were happy tears, commenting on how emotional brides always got. If only she knew the truth behind my breakdown. But speaking up would only lead to institutionalization, just as Daniel had threatened. The bachelorette party that evening was a carefully orchestrated affair. Dinner at an exclusive restaurant, followed by champagne at a private club. Sophia's friends had planned every detail based on her supposed preferences. I played along, pretending to enjoy the attention while feeling more isolated than ever. They presented me with gifts, lingerie, and honeymoon accessories. Each item felt like a costume for a play I'd never auditioned for. The friends took countless photos, documenting every moment for social media. Tomorrow, the world would see Sophia's perfect bachelorette celebration. Back at the estate after midnight, I found Daniel waiting in the library. He wanted to review the ceremony details one final time. His control extended to every aspect, from the music selections to the reception timeline. He'd even scripted our first dance, choosing a song that held special meaning for him and Sophia. He showed me the honeymoon itinerary again, 2 weeks in Italy completely planned. Every hotel, every restaurant, every tourist site Sophia had wanted to visit. He'd recreated her dream vacation down to the smallest detail. I would walk in her footsteps even on another continent. The next morning, Grandma woke me early for a final fitting. The seamstress had made tiny adjustments overnight. The dress fit like a second skin now, every inch tailored to perfection. I stood before the mirror while Grandma supervised, her critical eye missing nothing. So the locked door is for her protection to help her rest better? That's quite the story Grandma's telling there while literally imprisoning her own granddaughter for a wedding rehearsal. She produced a blue velvet box containing Sophia's grandmother's sapphire bracelet, something old and something blue combined. The matching earrings would be my something borrowed. The dress itself was new, every tradition observed, every detail perfect for Sophia's perfect wedding. Mom arrived with a hairdresser and makeup artist. They worked in tandem, transforming me into the bride Sophia should have been. The elaborate updo took 2 hours to complete. The makeup application felt like a mask being painted on, covering any trace of my true self. The photographer documented the preparation process, every moment moments staged for the wedding album. Me stepping into the dress, mom fastening the buttons, grandma placing the veil. Artificial moments of joy and anticipation. A family celebrating while I died inside. The bridesmaids arrived in matching silk robes, gifts from the bride according to tradition. They helped with final touches, adjusting my train and fluffing the veil. Sophia's best friend from Yale hugged me tightly, whispering how beautiful I looked, how proud Sophia's grandmother would have been. Daniel sent a gift, a diamond tennis bracelet with a note professing his love. I had to pose with it for photos, pretending to be touched by the gesture. The photographer captured my forced smile, another lie preserved for posterity. The bracelet joined the growing collection of jewelry binding me to this fate. The wedding planner reviewed the timeline one final time. Every minute accounted for from now until the reception's end. The cars would arrive in 30 minutes. The ceremony would begin in 2 hours. By tonight, I would be Mrs. Daniel Morrison, and the girl I'd been would be completely erased. I stood at the window, watching guests arrive at the estate for pre-ceremony photos. Aunts and uncles who'd known me my whole life, now believing I was dead. Cousins who'd played with me as children, now here to celebrate Sophia's wedding. The cruelest part was how happy they all looked. Mom appeared with a bouquet, white roses and baby's breath exactly as Daniel had selected. The flowers trembled in my hands, betraying my fear. She adjusted my veil one final time, her eyes holding a warning. This was the point of no return. In 1 hour, I would walk down that aisle. The photographer called for final portraits. I posed in Sophia's childhood room, surrounded by remnants of her life, trophies and certificates on the shelves, photos of her accomplishments covering the walls. Soon I would add wedding photos to the collection, the final piece of her stolen life. Grandma entered for our last moment alone. She straightened my necklace and smoothed my veil with practiced hands. Her eyes held no sympathy, only satisfaction that her plan was reaching completion. She'd orchestrated every detail, and now her favorite granddaughter would live on through me. The wedding planner announced it was time to leave. The bridal party gathered in the foyer, a flutter of silk and excitement. I moved through them like a ghost, present but not really there. The cars waited outside, decorated with white ribbons and flowers, my chariot to the final performance. As we drove toward the church, I watched the familiar streets pass by. Somewhere out there, people who'd known the real me went about their lives, unaware that I was still alive. After today, even that hope would die. I would be Sophia Morrison, forever and always. The church bells began to ring as we arrived, announcing the bride's arrival. Through the car window, I could see guests filing inside, Daniel waiting at the altar, my future closing in with every passing second. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out into the sunlight, ready to bury myself once and for all. The church doors loomed before me, heavy oak carved with saints who watched my approach. My legs moved mechanically up the stone steps while the bridal party arranged themselves behind me. The wedding coordinator fussed with my train, spreading the silk perfectly across the threshold. Inside, hundreds of faces turned toward me. The organ's first notes filled the vaulted ceiling. I gripped my bouquet tighter, white roses crushing between my fingers. Mom took my arm, her nails digging through the lace sleeve as we began the processional. Each step down the aisle felt like walking deeper underwater. Familiar faces smiled from the pews, relatives who'd bounced me on their knees, family friends who'd attended my real birthday parties. They dabbed at their eyes, seeing Sophia's triumph instead of my funeral. Daniel stood at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, hands clasped in front of him. His expression radiated satisfaction as he watched me approach. Behind him, his groomsmen stood in formation like guards at a prison gate. The walk stretched endlessly. My heel caught on the runner, making me stumble slightly. Mom's grip tightened, keeping me upright and moving forward. The photographer captured every moment from multiple angles, preserving this nightmare for future generations. When we finally reached the altar, Mom placed my hand in Daniel's before taking her seat. His fingers closed around mine with practiced gentleness that belied their strength. The minister began speaking about love and commitment while blood pounded in my ears. I barely heard the ceremony. My responses came automatically, Sophia's voice speaking the words they'd trained me to say. Daniel slipped the ring onto my finger, sealing it against the engagement ring. Another shackle locked in place. The minister asked if anyone objected. Silence filled the church. My throat constricted, wanting to scream my own objection, but Daniel's thumb pressed against my wrist in warning. The moment passed. The ceremony continued. During the unity candle lighting, my hands shook so badly that wax dripped onto the altar cloth. Daniel steadied my grip, his smile never wavering for the audience. The flame flickered between us, casting shadows across his face that made him look like a stranger. The pronouncement came too quickly. Daniel lifted my veil with theatrical slowness, playing to the crowd. His kiss was brief but possessive, claiming ownership in front of everyone who mattered. Applause erupted as he turned us to face the congregation. We walked back down the aisle as husband and wife. The photographer directed us to pause at the doors, capturing the newlyweds framed by sunlight. Rice pelted us as we descended the church steps. Each grain felt like a stone. The reception hall had been transformed into Sophia's dream venue. Twinkling lights, white roses everywhere, elegant place settings for 300 guests. Daniel led me through our entrance while the band played our song, not ours, but his and Sophia's. The receiving line lasted forever. Guest after guest congratulated us, sharing memories of Sophia that I pretended to recall. My cheeks ached from smiling. Daniel's hand never left my waist, a constant reminder of his control. During dinner, I pushed food around my plate while speakers took turns at the microphone. Grandma's speech painted a picture of predestined love, of Sophia finding her perfect match. She spoke about family legacy and continuation, her eyes finding mine with cold satisfaction. Daniel's father followed, welcoming Sophia into their family with political smoothness. He mentioned future grandchildren who would carry on both family names. The crowd murmured approval while my stomach churned. The cake-cutting ceremony required more performance. Daniel guided my hand as we sliced through 3 tiers of lemon and lavender. He fed me a piece, making sure the photographer captured my smile. The sweetness made me gag, but I swallowed it down. Our first dance began with Daniel leading me onto the empty floor. He'd choreographed every step, every turn, every dip. I followed his lead while 300 people watched us perform, his hand pressed against my back, keeping me close as we moved through the routine. Other couples joined us gradually. I caught glimpses of my relatives dancing, laughing, celebrating a union built on lies. Mom danced with Daniel's father, both families now bound together through this sham marriage. Between dances, guests approached with envelopes and wrapped gifts. The gift table overflowed with packages addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Morrison. Each one felt like another bar in my my cage, another tie to this false life. Daniel's college friends pulled him aside for photos while Sophia's bridesmaids surrounded me. They wanted pictures by the fountain, by the cake, by the flower arrangements. I posed and smiled, playing the happy bride they expected to see. The photographer orchestrated group shots with military precision. First the wedding party, then each family, then various combinations. My face felt frozen in its smile. Daniel's hand remained possessively on my waist throughout. As evening deepened, older guests began departing. They pressed envelopes into our hands, kissing my cheeks and wishing us happiness. Grandma supervised from her table, noting each departure with satisfaction. The band announced last dance. Daniel pulled me close as a slow song began. Around us, remaining guests swayed with their partners. He whispered reminders about our honeymoon flight in the morning, about the new house waiting for us, about the life he'd planned in detail. The reception finally ended near midnight. Staff began clearing tables while the wedding party gathered for final photos. My feet throbbed in the heels I'd worn for 12 hours. The heavy dress felt like armor I couldn't remove. We made our exit through a tunnel of sparklers held by remaining guests. The getaway car waited outside, decorated with ribbons and cans. Daniel helped me navigate the dress into the back seat while people cheered and threw birdseed, but we didn't drive to a hotel. Instead, Daniel directed the driver back to the estate. The honeymoon flight wasn't until tomorrow afternoon. Daniel's hand never leaving her waist during the reception is quite the control move. Nothing says romance like being treated like a valuable object that might escape if you let go for even a second. Tonight, I'd sleep in Sophia's room one last time before beginning my new life as Mrs. Morrison. Back at the estate, Mom helped me out of the dress while Grandma supervised. They hung it carefully in a preservation box, another artifact of Sophia's life perfectly maintained. The jewelry went back into velvet cases, family heirlooms returned to their keeping. I stood in Sophia's bathroom, removing pins from my hair. Each one dropped into the sink with a tiny ping. The elaborate style fell apart, leaving my hair tangled and strange. In the mirror, I looked like neither myself nor Sophia, just someone caught between identities. Daniel knocked, entering without waiting for permission. He'd changed into casual clothes but still wore his wedding ring. He sat on the bed, watching me through the bathroom doorway as I struggled with the last bobby pins. He talked about tomorrow's schedule, checkout time, airport arrival, flight details. His voice carried the same calm control it always had. Nothing had changed for him. He'd simply formalized an arrangement that had existed since he'd first agreed to Grandma's plan. When I finally emerged in pajamas, he was examining the gift envelopes. He sorted them methodically, making notes in his phone. Wedding gifts would be deposited into our joint account, he explained. Everything properly documented for thank you notes. He kissed my forehead before leaving, reminding me to pack my passport. Sophia's passport actually, with my photo carefully substituted by whatever connections Grandma had used. Another document cementing my false identity. Alone finally, I sat on Sophia's bed. My bed now, in a way. Tomorrow, I'd leave this house as Daniel's wife. The Italy trip would create 2 weeks of honeymoon photos, evidence of our happiness for social media and family albums. After that, the house he'd prepared. Daily life as Sophia Morrison. Dinner parties with his colleagues, charity events with his mother, Sunday dinners with both families. Years stretching ahead, all choreographed like tonight's reception. I moved to the window, looking out at the estate grounds one last time. Somewhere beyond those gates, my real life had ended the moment I'd said I do. There was no going back now. Daniel's family connections, Grandma's money, the legal documents, every escape route had been sealed. But as I stood there in the darkness, something shifted inside me. Not hope exactly, but a kind of grim determination. They'd taken my name, my freedom, my future. They'd buried me alive in Sophia's skin, but they hadn't broken me, not completely. I thought about Sophia's diary, about her growing desperation before the accident. She'd been trapped too, just in a different way. Maybe that's why Grandma had chosen me, not just for my resemblance, but because I'd already learned to survive under her control. The next morning arrived too quickly. Staff loaded luggage while I dressed in the outfit Mom had selected. A cream suit perfect for a new bride traveling. Sophia's style, of course. Everything always was. Daniel arrived precisely on time, looking refreshed and eager. He helped me into the car while Grandma and Mom watched from the doorway. Their satisfied expressions followed us down the driveway. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 beginning. At the airport, Daniel guided me through check-in with practiced ease. Other travelers smiled at us, recognizing newlyweds by our obvious happiness. His hand never left my back as we moved through security, boarded the plane, settled into first-class seats. As the plane lifted off, I watched the city disappear below. Somewhere down there lay my gravestone, marking the spot where I'd officially died. But I was still breathing, still thinking, still remembering who I really was beneath Sophia's perfect exterior. 2 weeks in Italy stretched ahead, then a lifetime after that. But I'd learned something from Sophia's diary, from her final desperate entries. The cage they'd built was strong, but not perfect. She'd almost found a way out. Maybe, given time and patience, I could finish what she'd commentary started. For now, I played the part. I held Daniel's hand during takeoff. I smiled when the flight attendant congratulated us. I accepted the champagne and raised my glass when Daniel toasted to our future. But behind Sophia's practiced smile, my mind was working. They thought they'd won. Grandma with her money and connections, Daniel with his calculated devotion, Mom with her complicit assistance. They'd orchestrated everything perfectly, down to the last detail. Except for one thing. They'd forgotten that buried things sometimes claw their way back to the surface. And I had nothing but time to dig. Thanks for sticking with me through all the twists and turns. Definitely been a ride worth wondering through together. Until we chat again. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.